Chapter 31. Thursday noon. In the kitchen, Mac put on the coffee, while Doreen sat down and sent off the email to him that she had already drafted. "Okay," she said. "You have a digital copy." "Good," he said as he opened her fridge. She watched him in surprise. "Are you hungry?" He snorted. "Always. But we'd planned spaghetti for Friday. Unless you want it tonight, and we can have leftovers tomorrow?" She stared at him. Spaghetti twice is always a good idea. "So let's check to see if you have the ingredients we need." He checked it all out, nodded, and said, "Perfect." "Good," she said. "But we don't need to start yet, right?" "No. Not until later this afternoon. I'm still recovering from almost no sleep last night. That's why the coffee. After this, I'll go back and start dealing with this case. Obviously, we need to take a new look at all the evidence." "Yes, but honestly, that's 4 more cold cases," she said in a sing-song voice, "plus Steve's current case." He slowly turned and glared at her. She wiped the smile off her face and batted her eyelashes at him instead. He chuckled. "As much as we appreciate it." "I know," she said. "I'm making you guys look like idiots." At his glare, she laughed, holding her hands in front of her in a gesture of conciliation. "I'm joking." He nodded. "Better. The fact is, you have a knack for this, and for whatever reason people are coming to you too." "That's not a bad thing," she said. "I'm sorry you guys get stuck with all the paperwork." "It's okay," he said. "We're happy to see the closure for all these cases too." "Right," she said. "And I still have a couple other things to work on." Like finding maybe a memorial society or a pioneering society or whatever for all those hope chest items." "All of them?" "I'm not sure. I was thinking definitely the nightgowns and the love letters. Maybe some of the dishes, but I don't know." "I would contact Scott first about that set of dishes," Max said. "If it's not worth anything, then donate it all." "Or," she said with a wry look on her face, "maybe I'll keep it as a good set for myself." He looked at her in surprise and nodded. "I like that idea. Why not have yourself a Sunday set of dishes? At least somebody'll use them after however many decades they've been sitting here." "You mean more than 1 century?" He rolled his eyes. "If that's the case, that would be very sad. And I highly doubt the original owner of all those items would mind if you found joy in stuff she had collected for her own wedding." "I like the idea," Doreen said softly. Then her practical side returned and she said, "Unless Scott says something to convince me otherwise." He chuckled. Always the pragmatist. "I was broke just long enough," she said, "that I saw that cliff of poverty and realized how closely poised I was to fall over the edge. If it wasn't for Nan, I would have hit that bottom real fast." "But you didn't because of your Nan," he said gently. "And honestly, a lot of people end up doing very well because of their family. If it isn't an inheritance, it's a helping hand." "I know. Once again, I find myself almost tearful over what Nan did for me." "Then maybe this afternoon you should take a walk down there. Give her something for a change instead of letting her send you home with something." She looked at him, and then realized what he was saying. "Oh my," she said, jumping to her feet, her hand to her chest. "Do you think I've been taking advantage of her?" She looked around at her kitchen. "Oh, now I feel terrible." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Max said. He reached out to gently grab her by her shoulders. "That's not what I meant. But you have received so much, and although I highly doubt Nan's looking for anything, she might appreciate a little something too." Doreen sat down on her butt and nodded. "I haven't done enough for her. I need to spend more time with her." "Or you might want to remember she has a life," he said in a wry tone. "So don't expect her to want to spend more time with you, but that doesn't mean you can't deliver flowers." She smiled at him. "You're better at this than I am." "Better at what?" "Relationships," she said. "I had very little to do with anybody. I hardly know the nuances." "Oh, I understood the politeness of taking a good bottle of Burgundy or red wine whenever we went to a dinner party, and I knew exactly how to thank everybody for a disgusting dinner on some occasions. I also understood how to save face and how to make everything appear to be perfect on the surface. But real relationships like what I have with Nan, and dare I say the friendship we have, I don't have much experience with." Mac leaned against the kitchen counter and crossed his arms over his chest. "That's a really interesting insight. I would definitely say what we have is real. I feel like I can honestly yell at you and tell you off when I need to. But then again, you apparently feel totally okay hanging up on me on a regular basis." She snickered. "Well, it's not quite passive aggressiveness, which was all I was ever allowed to be, and never even that much because my ex shot me down for it. But I do feel free to tell you how I feel from time to time." He rolled his eyes. "Good, because I would hate to think you were pandering to me." She shook her head. "Not happening. The animals might though if it got them a treat." He looked at them to see Thaddeus staring at him. "What do you want, big guy?" Thaddeus opened his mouth and said, "Food. Food. Food." Doreen bolted to her feet, looked at the animals, and said, "You can't be hungry again." Yet, with guilt ripping through her, she fed them all over again. Goliath sauntered over, took a few bites, and lay down in front of his food bowl, as if in disgust. On the other hand, Muggs had no problem devouring his bowl of food. He wandered over toward Goliath and sniffed, then he lay down but shoved Goliath back a little bit. The cat reached out and swiped his paw across Muggs's head. But then Goliath got up and walked away. Muggs then devoured Goliath's lunch too. Doreen stared at him. "Muggs, since when do you eat cat food?" Mac chuckled. "Lots of dogs have appetite control issues. In this case, I think it's just a jealousy." "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said, as she pulled away the rest of Goliath's lunch, then set the bowl on the counter so Muggs couldn't inhale anymore. She washed her hands, only to turn around and see Thaddeus working away on Goliath's food. "No, wait," she cried out and raced to Thaddeus. She snagged the cat's bowl and glared at Thaddeus. "That's not bird food." "It's bird food," he said. "It's bird food." And he hopped up on her arm and started pecking away at the bowl. Stunned, Doreen looked at Mac, who shrugged and said, "In the wild, birds will eat all kinds of things, including cat food and dog food. So I doubt it will hurt him." "What kind is it?" She looked at the label on the can still on the counter and said, "Fish." "Well, there you go. I'm sure Thaddeus won't be hurt from having a little fish." "But it's Goliath's food," she said. "How will I keep track of who's eating what and making sure they're getting enough if they eat everybody else's food?" "Don't worry about it right now," Max said gently. "You've been distracted. What are the chances you didn't feed them this morning?" She cast her mind back and then shrugged. "I have no clue. If I did, it would explain why Goliath isn't interested." She walked to where she kept a bowl of birdseed for Thaddeus, and it was empty. She frowned and shrugged. "I honestly don't know." But she moved Thaddeus to the table and put the rest of the cat food in a sealed baggie and into the fridge. She closed the fridge with a thunk. "What about you?" Mac asked. "Did you eat?" "I got up late so I didn't eat much," she confessed. "And it is lunchtime. Maybe a sandwich." She pulled out the fixings for a sandwich and then stopped and looked at Mac suspiciously. "Are you hungry?" He gave her a smile. "So, does that mean I'm invited to have a sandwich with you, or does that mean you think I'm staying long enough so I can mooch a sandwich off you?" Instantly, she felt guilty. There's enough for 2 sandwiches, she said, grandly trying to put her own suspicions behind her. And yes, I do owe you a sandwich. You don't owe me anything, Mac said, reaching into the fridge and finding a tomato and lettuce, rooting around for anything else, grabbing 2 plates, then walking to the table, pulling out 4 slices of bread. But yes, thank you. I'll have a sandwich. When I haven't had any sleep, I need more food to keep going. Doreen felt bad. I'm sorry. You're right. It's been a pretty rough day all around. That it has, Mac said. He sat down and proceeded to make himself a sandwich. She worked alongside him and made herself one too. He went easy on the meat, but heavy on the vegetables. She watched in fascination as he added layers to his sandwich. He put pickles on first, then he put peppers, tomatoes, onions, lettuce, and she just stared when he went to pick it up. How can you even get your mouth around that? He shot her a look and said, easy. And he took a big bite. Hers was about half that tall. She sat beside him and ate hers too. Are you sure it was Steve in his house fire? She asked out of the blue. He turned to her and said, that's up to the coroner to decide. She nodded. Right. I guess that makes sense. As she kept eating, her mind was busy with the various cases. If everybody's dead, I guess the cases get closed? If we have enough proof and evidence that we know who and what was behind it all, and everybody involved is deceased, then yes, it would close with notes to that effect. She nodded. Well, that would be nice. Then she brightened. We can get on the Bob Small case. He munched his sandwich, but she could feel his growing angry vibes. She sighed, took another bite, swallowed, and then added, or maybe not. He sagged in his chair, popped the last bite of his sandwich in his mouth, and said, definitely not. And then he hopped up and poured 2 cups of coffee. He gave her one as she finished her sandwich. As soon as I've had this, I'm gone. She nodded. Makes sense to me. So they sat outside, both tired but happy they were where they needed to be in life. Finally, Mac finished his cup and left. Doreen watched him leave almost sadly. But in his case, he was like a boomerang. The more he left, the more he came back. And she was starting to realize just what a darn good thing that was.